web through this.
He's a Philistine. I was able to do it.
He's a gangster.
I'm not a great lover of cats. That's my fear.
You're a disgrace, you are.
Not me, but that's my fear.
You're a disgrace, you are.
Hello and welcome to One-on-One Shadowboxing. Today our studio got a guest. He's Malcolm Mummery. And Malcolm is the chairperson of the Dadour group of people. Is the Dadour spirit still alive?
Very much so, Tobo. He understood the essence of what a community is about. We learn from our parents, but really, once we walk out the door and we're old enough to start getting around among people, we learn from the kids we're at school with, the kids we play footy with. Community is the cauldron out of which a community spirit and eventually a national spirit evolves. Tom Dadour was a GP by profession,
Yes.
and he cared enormously. And he was the guy you went to when you had anything wrong. So he was a doctor there were a couple of doctors in town, but he was the legend. He was the one everyone knew about.
So the real community man.
Very much a community man. And very much a liberal. By the 70s, when Tom Dadour was in Parliament,
Yes.
he'd already been a local councillor. He understood that the vehicles, the way our culture evolved was under threat. He believed in a liberal philosophy. We don't see the Liberal Party now, everyone thinks that's a liberal, but they're not. But in reality, in Australia, liberalism has died. We've got a Conservative Party that basically wants to hold power, and we've got what used to be a leftist party that wants power, and in reality they just fight over power. They don't fight over fundamentals. This issue that Tom Dadour was on about was at the cusp of that, because part of this, not long after passing this, he left the Liberal Party to become an independent. And he stayed an independent right up until the point where he was going to retire, and he put his support behind Carmen Lawrence, who was a Labor Party person. So he was on the cusp of working out that neither side seemed to be actually taking us where he thought we should go. And what he did was put in this amendment that said...
So what was his achievement? What we are revitalizing now? What's the Dadour spirit, Malcolm?
The crowning glory of the Dadour era was giving people the capacity to protect their local community. So he said, if suburbs are going to grow like Topsy and be these huge things where people hardly knew each other and basically only would see each other at a shopping centre or another and didn't really relate to one another, that those sorts of big monoliths should be broken down. And he said government should do that. That's their responsibility to do. However, if governments decide that those big things are good, then they might start promoting them. And if they do, they might force small communities that actually work to become sort of something bigger that doesn't work at a community level. A crucial part of liberal philosophy.
Yes.
And as it happens, that if you read the debates at the time, there are a number of people on the Labor Party that actually supported it too. In fact, I think anyone of reason
common sense
and common sense would support the notion that if a community is willing to fight for its own identity, that's a good thing. It's always a good thing. If people feel they belong, and from that belonging they get a sense of self-worth and they value their government, therefore they value the law, it's better for everybody. As it happens, my son goes to Shenton College. A kid that he used to sit with in the library from time to time and study with was killed. Now you ask yourself, how could a tragedy like that happen? These kids are, I mean, they're just gorgeous young kids.
Yes.
How could something like that happen? And the reality is that that's an attribute of decaying community standards. And how a Liberal Party could even think about suspending or removing the very essence of a community's capacity to protect itself is absolutely bizarre. I cannot believe that this is happening.
But this is happening today.
It sure
so it's
is.
not the old liberals who established and accepted the Dadour law. These are the newly elected ones. And Colin Barnett, he's on the run to force the communities to amalgamate into big cities or big towns. Why is he doing that for the start? What do you think? So why destroy the communities which are working, as you said, even small communities? Nothing wrong with that. Why he's got this idea and how?
Well, I would guess, and I'm only guessing, because political parties are such small entities nowadays. They've got virtually no members. Both the major parties represent about 0.3% of the Australian population. So they're tiny organisations, tiny. And of course they depend on funding. Without funding, you cannot beat your opposition. So both parties are scrambling for money to pay for ads, to the media,
to be elected.
To be elected. Now, so they are directly or indirectly driven by who funds them. And they're so small that they don't represent an external view. They only represent their own view. That means
but
that
the politicians, like our Premier, is walking on the streets thinking he's there to own the world because he's got the license to kill.
Yes.
So how can they maintain that mentality when they know there's no public behind them? Even if their own political party member is not there because there's no numbers, and then they just do what they do now.
It's more complex than that.
Okay.
The reality is, I used to be the manager of computing for what used to be Sequa and now Western Power, and in those days, he was our minister.
Colin Barnett.
Colin Barnett was Minister for Energy. And he just came in. We'd had a cyclone through. We took days to get power back on. It was chaotic. And he said, this is bullshit. We should have power underground. Why haven't we got underground power? We're going to have underground power. The organisation, I was like, went into hysterics. It's going to break the state. It's going to take years to do. It's going to be too expensive. All the reasons in the world. Yep. He said, crap, just do it. And the councils got together and everyone got together. And now underground power is the norm. So Colin Barnett is not a bad man. He wants to do the right thing. It's just he's part of a system that for many, many decades now has been getting more and more introverted, less and less representative of the broad scope of people, and more ritualised. I think he has probably been funded by, well, not he's been funded, but his organisation has been funded by large developers who find it really frustrating getting the approval to build high-rise, high-density developments in inner suburbs.
Yes.
And oddly enough, people in those suburbs aren't that attracted to higher land values. They actually like their community, so they fight back.
Yes.
And people like, I would guess, the Property Council, Joe and his team are pretty effective, and they're just doing their business. They're just representing one view. But when one powerful view is applied to a system that is no longer capable of gathering a large array of views, you end up with what we've got, which is government of extremes. I don't think personally that Colin Barnett is a bad man or an extremist.
But where is the ear? So where is the communication? If you are a great man, first of all, you have to be a great leader.
Yes.
Then I think, is a communication, as you said, in communities, big or small, in between.
Yeah.
And that's what I can see myself. Somehow, I couldn't connect the dots.
Yeah, I think I think
Yes?
the mistake you're making, and I'm sorry, the shadow boxing, we're allowed to box a bit, is that you're
Absolutely.
assuming that anyone for the last 50 years is actually being able to genuinely hear the voice of the people. To hear the voice of the people, you really have to be local government. You have to have
That's very true. That's very
a
true.
community. If you've got 20,000, Subiaco's got 18 or 19,000 now. I think Cottesloe would have about 20,000.
Yeah.
They're about the same size as a state seat, right?
Yes, exactly.
But if you want to hear a Subiaco council has 3 councillors from each ward, so you end up with this capacity to actually listen to people.
Mm-hmm.
And that's enormously valuable. If you go to a much bigger area where it's, say, in Stirling or Wanneroo, these bigger areas, one local councillor has to listen to 20,000 people. It's like a state member. When's the last time you spoke to your state member? I mean, you can't. They're too busy. So if you rely on the ear of the people, and I agree with you, it's massively important, you somehow have to get a process that actually feeds the voices of the people up through a hierarchy, so each level gets a condensed version of what the people want.
I think
Now-
it's a very good point you make here, but also the value of the real leader who can go among the people, who not running from an invitation for from a public debate, like our Premier had done it several times, even before the elections, and also if it's something happening in the streets and people demonstrating and telling and try to send a message, you're there. And how many times we can have and seen Columbine standing in front of 10,000 people protesting or 5,000 people protesting? Never, ever.
Yeah, look, I agree he's not all that comfortable talking to a large group. I would guess that. But I don't know that that invalidates him as a great premier. I sailed with Richard Court. In fact, he taught me to sail at one stage. And I have known Peter Dowding as a kid. He was in the suburb, just a couple of blocks away. He lived, and his father was the priest at our church. Neither of those are fabulous communicators either, but they're honourable people.
Mm-hmm.
It's about honour, because when you're in a system that wants you to be corrupt, it rewards you for being corrupt. When you're in a system where media snaps little
10 seconds.
10 seconds of information in a newscast is the difference between 1,000 votes this way or 1,000 votes that way. It's not democracy. It's a con job. It's treating us like a herd. It's waving flags around and making us run in different directions. It's not considered. It's not thinking about where we'll be, the next generation, how the next generation will fare. I mean, the next generation have to deal with climate change. Crikey Moses, that is... I mean, it's worse than facing a world war. And a world war killed 70 million people. They're facing an incredible challenge. They need a system that works, and it doesn't.
On that note, Malcolm, we have to go to a short break, but please stay with us, because after the break, we're coming back with more discussion with Malcolm Mummery.